Very good. Yeah. Thank you all for coming today. It's I'm really excited to introduce Marvin Bouknight as our speaker for the seminar series today. I'm really excited also for the grad students to get to interact with Marvin. I wish I could sit on you guys' lunch because he is a great example of kind of a non-linear career path. And I mean, we were just going over all the things he's done, everything from, first of all, he's 1988 wildlife fisheries biology graduate. He worked for Charleston County Parks and Rec. He commercially raised catfish and was a hatchery manager. He's also been the director of the Discovery Place in Charlotte. You were one of the few people that were permitted by the DNR to move alligators. And then you also helped DNR track down panther sightings. South Carolina. He has a podcast with his wife. Yeah. And what really we're excited about is he is working with the Catawba Nation, and he's doing some really innovative stuff with river cane and monitoring wildlife there. And there's lots of potential for collaboration. As Marvin will talk about, Catawba Nation is the only federally recognized tribe in the state of South Carolina. So that, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it. Hey, guys. So this is going to be informal. So, I want you guys to feel like you can ask questions during the presentation. Whatever you want to do is fine with me. I'm Marvin. How many of you came to Catawba Nation with David? Do you have anybody in here that came?
Yeah.
One of you did? Yeah, a couple of you. Oh, there you go. All right. Yeah, so you guys came to visit. So we host occasionally, we'll host some folks from Winthrop University. We'll host some STEM high school students occasionally, things like that. I was set up to host a group from students from South Carolina. They didn't make it. They saw a sign that said clean restrooms next 5 miles, and they got out and they cleaned all the restrooms for the next 5 miles. So they never came. So yeah. I grew up in West Columbia, and my whole family are all Gamecock fans. So so we had a lot of books with a lot of pictures. I work with Catawba Nation, definitely. Gosh, and like David said, my career has been very nonlinear, no doubt about it. And I think that's probably one of those things that I've been so passionate about nature my entire life that I'm going to find a way to stay in the field. All right. I mean, when I was 15 years old and they had a weekend and a summer Bible school at my mom and dad's church, everyone was doing scripture-based, Bible-based, all this kind of stuff. I did wildlife of South Carolina. And I started out with 5 kids in my class. And by the end of the week, I had 30 people, with 15 of them being adults wanting to learn about wildlife. And so I was teaching classes when I was 15. When I was a little fella, about that big, Mom was there, she was planting bulbs in the backyard. We had azaleas in the front. I went around front, it was a little tight, I didn't go to preschool or kindergarten or any of that stuff. So I was with Mom, and I ran around the front, and a big old bumblebee came and flew and just hovered right in front of me. And my eyes lit up and I shot out around. I said, Mama, I saw a bee. She goes, sweetie, he's not gonna bother you. I said, no, I saw his eyes. And she said, that boy's he's gonna be something. We didn't know what it was called, but we knew I was gonna be a naturalist, wildlife biologist, or something like that. So I've been fortunate to stay in the field, like David said. I've wrestled alligators. I've climbed up into osprey nests, and one of my favorite memories is when I was here at Clemson. We went to Webb Wildlife Center, and you guys are going to be shocked when you hear this because they don't let y'all do this stuff anymore. But we all piled in the back of a pickup truck with chainsaws, went out and cut 4-inch sapling trees, augered holes and put up nets and put corn out. And then we came back at night, and when there were deer in there, they let 4 of us, depending on the number of deer, 4 of us go into the corral, and they lifted up the nets, and we tackled the deer and tagged their ears, right? You're having a stroke right now. But that was the kind of stuff we got to do. I was very fortunate, because it was very hands-on. And that's kind of what I'm doing with Catawba right now. We're doing a lot of hands-on stuff, literally getting out into the field. I mean, my office is outside every day, and I love that until I can't get inside. I'm one of those idiotic people that, for fun, I took my wife on a 5-day paddle in Okefenokee. That's what we did. We also just got back about 3 weeks ago from going up in northern Minnesota. Okay, the high was -17. There were probably 12 inches of snow on the ground. and I'm pumping a 500 millimeter lens and a camera, trying to get a shot of a great gray owl. So, and that's what I do for fun, right? So it's kind of neat. It was a neat different habitat. I was excited about that. So let's talk about what we're doing with Catawba. How many of you are familiar with Catawba? Anybody know anything about Catawba Nation at all? Yeah, not a lot of people do. I was born in South Carolina. I didn't really realize that it was a federally recognized tribe in South Carolina. Federally recognized would be like the Cherokee, right? Porch Creek Indians down near the Gulfport, Mississippi. You can probably look at some of the Cherokees out in Oklahoma, the Seminoles, the Mississippis. All those are federally recognized tribes. Catawba is the only one in South Carolina. The Lumbee tribe is actually applying for federal recognition currently. And when they get federal recognition, it releases a whole bunch of funding and everything along those lines for them to have. The Catawba Nation, at one time, I'll show you here just a minute on the slide, it encompassed a great bit of the Piedmont of South Carolina. And they were known as a very fierce people. They were known as warriors. And it's funny, the connections, I always talk about David, you guys are doing that research with weasels. And weasels were actually, a lot of times, their skins were hung on the shields. Because Catawbas were known as being fierce warriors. How fierce can you get as a weasel, right? I mean, it's a fierce little creature, so it was kind of like a spirit totem for them as well in Catawba, which is kind of cool. So, our Department of Natural Resources has been around for 2 years. Last year was our first full year of doing any type of monitoring. Before that, nothing. I mean, absolutely nothing. Maybe a couple of groups would come in and do some stuff. Can't find any of those records because they took those records with them. So now we're kind of starting from the beginning. And we got some grants through BIA, which is Bureau of Indian Affairs. We got some endangered species grants. We got some invasive species grants. And so the way I was able to convince them that I needed endangered species grants was that I don't know if we've got endangered species. I don't know. I won't know until I do baseline surveys to determine if we have them or not. So, and also doing a lot about them being an underserved tribe and all those kind of things like that. And so they granted us the money. And so the first year, what we did was we did some salamanders, we did amphibians, we did reptile management stuff. We also did baseline surveys with that we'll talk about here shortly. We also kind of dipped our toe in the bat echolocation and auditory reporting pool, which is kind of interesting. So we'll get into that. So a little bit about, there we go. A little bit about what we do there. So David told you kind of how varied my career has been. It's really paying off now. Because here, if I want to do it, I can do it, right? So we're doing cover board surveys. We're doing stuff with bats. Okay, we're also doing stuff. Anybody familiar with Schweinet sunflower? A little bit. Okay, so Schweinet sunflowers are actually probably one of the rarest wildflowers in the United States. It's only known from North Carolina and South Carolina. We'll talk about that here shortly too. Of course, doing some birding and things like that with birds. Georgia aster is another threatened plant. The bats in winter coverts and trying to find them for winter roost. I put the black bear because it's just so damn cute. And also some benthic macroinvertebrates. So anybody into benthic macros, right? Yeah, that's going in the woods, going in the streams and flipping rocks and looking at little insects. Y'all know Dr. John Morse? Yeah, he's probably one of the most awesome human beings I've ever met. I took a class from him up at Highlands, and he is fantastic. He actually wrote me a letter of recommendation, handwritten. Who does that anymore this day and age? Man, he's an awesome guy. So I learned I got a passion for benthic macroinvertebrates with him and a few other folks in the field, and we do that as part of our monitoring. And I'll show you how that correlates together here too, shortly. So here's kind of the state of South Carolina. Here's kind of what Catawba would have been many years ago in terms of the land that they occupied. Okay, this is what the Catawba Indians looked like when they actually went in to try and apply for federal recognition. However, get this thing to work here. See the little two tiny dots? That's now what Catawba has as a federal reservation. Okay, they've got about 1,000 acres. About 350 of it is in a new park called Green Earth. 700 something is along the Catawba River. That's where we're focusing most of our surveys right now. It's a bottomland floodplain type forest, followed by a few uplands with planted pines and things like that. So it's a pretty varied habitat. And so the idea behind it, of course, is to identify what you've got on on tribal land. Now, I don't know if you guys have thought about this, but with tribal lands, they're extremely important. I don't mean they're important for the obvious reasons, which are to preserve ancestral land and cultural practices and traditions. That's low-hanging fruit. As biologists, wildlife biologists, naturalists, fisheries guys and stuff, they weren't managed the way a lot of Western lands were managed, right? All this other land and stuff went through traditional wildlife practices that were learned over the years. These lands weren't done that. Okay? That means a lot of them weren't cleared for agriculture. It means a lot of them weren't cleared for planted pines. It means they were pretty much just left. Okay? Cool thing about that is these habitats remain intact, and populations of floral fauna were kind of in a sense protected from neglect, but protected. So that means that if what it would look like in the early 1900s, late 1800s, we still some of that today. So can you imagine you guys are studying like different populations and stuff like that? How about going to these lands and looking and seeing what's there, and it kind of gives you a snapshot of what maybe used to be on kind of urbanized land a little bit short way. So it's kind of a great opportunity. This really comes into play when you talk about places like where the Navajo Nation is, where they own thousands and thousands and thousands of acres. I mean, we're talking about some of these folks having the most intact buffalo populations out there, black-footed ferrets, all these things on tribal lands, right? Out of the reach from federal, state, all these different places. Now, how many of you, anybody in here ever read the book Coyote America? Oh, great. That should be required reading. That's a great book. Man, you talk about a just all out torch the earth assault on predators. The United States government and the coyotes basically just did this, right? All the wolves were gone, right? They just tried to wipe out the wolves. They tried to wipe out the bears. They tried to wipe out the catamount, panthers, painters, whatever you want to call them, cougars. And the coyotes flourished. And these guys put out thousands and thousands of poison baits, snout traps, all kinds of things, exploding traps. Coyotes just flourished. I mean, it's incredible. They did shooting, like they'd have 5 or 6 helicopters tracking down, kind of shooting, didn't bother. Now they're spreading east, and we're starting to see it. And it always cracks me up because people tell me, oh my gosh, that is such an invasive species. That's not an invasive species. That is a champion species. That is one species that overcame a lot of stuff and then just expanded, right? And so we have them all over where we are as well. So coyotes are a great example of one of those things that was protected following all the wolves and everything like that. But that's the cool thing about reservation land. They weren't flying over reservation lands and shooting wolves and shooting bears and shooting panthers because they weren't allowed. So those areas remained intact. They're also not subject to habitat fragmentation due to development. I should have put an asterisk on that, so I'll come back to that in a little bit. So why are these baseline surveys so important right now? Well, obviously we have to establish a baseline, all right, which is basically, it's a snapshot of right now. That's what we're looking at. We're not looking at a snapshot of what it used to be. We're looking at what we're seeing and what we're documenting in the data we're collecting now. It's great to take this data and compare it to historical data. Okay. Anybody ever heard of TEK? Traditional ecological knowledge, right? So in a lot of folklore, in a lot of documentation, and a lot of things, we can actually compare what used to be here with traditional ecological knowledge, with oral stories, with talking with elders, and compare it to what we're finding today. So it's a great way to include traditional ecological knowledge in that. And we'll talk about how we incorporate that here in just a little bit. The other thing is it gives us a better understanding of Piedmont, South Carolina, flora and fauna. Now, when it comes down to funding and money and stuff like that, everybody loves the coast, everybody loves the mountain, nobody likes the Piedmont, right? We get screwed in funding all the time, but that's starting to change a little bit. We're starting to see more funding come our way. The work that we're doing is actually contributing to an understanding of an under-surveyed area of South Carolina. So we're contributing to that as well, and it's filling in these gaps of data. Right? Anybody disagree with the fact that the Piedmont's been understudied? Right? When you guys actually go and do stuff, do you go up to the mountains to study, or do you go down to the coast? I haven't heard anybody say, God, I cannot wait to go to Orangeburg, South Carolina. It's just a flora and fauna hotbed. You know, it's really nice. So hopefully we'll see that change a little bit as well. So part of what we're doing is we can all look at a federal list and we can sit there and go, this is endangered, this is threatened, this is species of concern, this is this is species of least concern. we have to incorporate, and we should incorporate, cultural significant species as well. And so one of the things that we're doing that was identified early on was river cane, giant river cane. There are actually 3 species of cane in South Carolina. There's a gigantea, which is a river cane. There's a switch cane, which anybody who grew up in South Carolina knew it's called switch cane. That's Tecta. And then there's Appalachiana, which is hill cane. And so they used to believe that basically Appalachian hill cane was found in the mountains of South and North Carolina on wooded slopes, right at the toe. Then you would find Tecta a little bit more down toward the coast, and you'd find giant river cane from us up into the mountains. Because we're starting to turn the spotlight on giant river cane, we're starting to see it's in a lot of different places. Tecta's in a lot of different places. And Catawba, we discovered the very first Appalachian hill cane, not in the Appalachians. It's actually on Catawba land. We documented that, and then they were like, well, it's here, it's got to be other places. And they went to some similar habitat. Now they're starting to find Appalachian hill cane. Now, when you identify river cane, you cut a cross section of the rhizome, and you look in there, and it's like a spare tire with a hole, right? It's like a donut. Tecta looks like the donut with secondary canals around. So it's like you took your 2 fingers and poked them in the donut, and that's what the cross section looks like. Hill cane is maybe so, maybe no. Some of them have the secondary, some of them don't. So where you've got Appalachian hill cane and you've got Tecta growing together, so we're all chatting and everything, talking, we're going to do all these genetic tests, stuff like that. Had one guy in the back, it was a buddy of mine from Mississippi Choctaw, Roger Kane, and he goes, there's an easier way. And all these scientists and everybody just kind of said, oh, really? And what would that be? He said, hill cane is deciduous, the others are not. And it was like, holy shit. Wow, that's traditional ecological, right? Straight around the face. And Roger's like huge in all this river cane. He knows this stuff, right? So scientific knowledge and traditional ecological knowledge may not be speaking the same language, but these guys have a full understanding of that plant that goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. So after chatting with Roger about the different things and stuff like that, we start realizing that through a lot of the southeastern tribal nations, a lot of them have a desire to want to work with river cane. They just don't know how. And that's what we've been doing. And I say we've been doing, me, because I'm kind of was the only one in our place that was doing these stuff. So I was digging up rhizomes and planting them and trying to figure out how to transplant and do all this stuff. And I went to Oklahoma and spoke about it and everything like that. And I realized that we're actually doing a lot more work than a lot of other folks are doing. And they're looking to us to kind of help lead the way on trying to reestablish and transplant river cane. So that's kind of what we've been doing. It's a culturally important plant for Catawba as well as other southeastern tribes for basketry. Anybody familiar at all with the process of making cane baskets? Anyone at all? So there's a difference between traditional basket weavers and traditional basket makers. Okay, a basket maker is the person that goes out, identifies the river cane, harvests the river cane, prepares the river cane, and weaves baskets. The basket weaver takes all that hard work that somebody else is doing, and they weave the basket. Okay, doesn't mean one's better than the other. It just means that one is more concentrating on the actual art of the weaving. The other one is actually on the entire process. River cane has to be cut, it has to be split, and it has to be peeled and dried, and then it can be woven in a basket. It can be dyed as well. Okay, this is something that has not happened at Catawba in over 100 years. Nobody has made a basket, a Catawba river cane basket in over 100 years. They also use them to make blowguns with darts. They also use them to make river cane flute, which I had the wonderful opportunity to hear an elder play a river cane flute down by the shores of the Catawba River. So you literally can hear the river flowing through his music. I mean, it's just spectacular. So all those things, there's even tools. Catawba are known for their pottery. They even use river cane tools to shape their pottery. So river cane is basically ingrained in the very fabric of Catawba Nation, culturally and traditionally. So, ecologically and environmentally, these river, are y'all familiar at all with river cane? How many of you are familiar with longleaf pine? Oh yeah. We're trying to get the agent, the PR agent for longleaf pine to help us with river cane because man, longleaf pine has got it going on. River cane sitting there going, but what about us? We lost what, 98% of longleaf pine, right? And it's made a big comeback. And we get tax breaks to plant it, red cockaded woodpecker, all these different things, all the different fire dependent communities associated with longleaf pine. River cane is very similar. We've lost 98% of our river cane. The problem is nobody's replanting it. So with urbanization, with fragmentation, with development, everything that's happening is we're just seeing river cane continue to go down, continue to go down. There are a lot of animals that used to be associated with river cane. Passenger pigeon has said that it was probably one of the top 3 food sources, seed sources for passenger pigeon. Carolina parakeets were known to nest and roost in giant river cane patches. Bouknight's warbler, which is now thought to be extinct, was a big denizen of river cane. Also, Swainson's warbler. There's a lot of lepidopteran species that were associated with it. Panthers used to hide and ambush prey. And my favorite is the little guy right there in the middle, which is a swamp rabbit. Its nickname is called the cane cutter because it used to feed on the young shoots of river cane. Okay, well, we've lost 98% of that. They describe, a lot of the early naturalists describe river cane so big, tall, and thick that they would have to circumnavigate it because they couldn't go around it. We're talking about circumnavigating like 6 miles. Okay, you don't hardly see that anymore. But I had a chance to go to Mississippi and see some of their cane fields. Guys, it's incredible. Nothing else is growing below it. It's just river cane. So it's a very amazing habitat. And it used to grow all along the rivers in South Carolina, all the way from probably Edisto all the way up. So one of the things we realized is that it is extremely important, not only culturally, but also environmentally and also ecologically. Because if you plant river cane and you plant it about probably 30 feet long, about 20 feet wide on a farm, it'll actually take all the phosphates and nitrates and everything out of the water and soil to like 85 to 90%. Okay, it's a huge carbon sink. It's an amazing plant. It physically filters, chemically filters, and purifies the water. So it's extremely important. So you know what? Culturally, traditionally, that should be enough for us to replant river cane, right? Realistically, it's not. I don't care how it gets planted, right? We're starting to experiment now with taking rhizomes and planting them along riverbanks and stuff to stabilize the soil. The rhizomes are so vigorous that they actually hold. We're actually using it below outfalls of pipes and everything to slow down erosion. Again, I don't care. I don't care how it gets planted. But if it gets planted and it gets protected, then it's going to flourish again. Okay. So some of the work that we're doing now is we're trying to identify existing river cane on combination lands. Okay. We're going to use it for cultural harvest, create habitat. We're going to use it for landscaping, right? Imagine coming into the tribal center and on each side of the door, you've got a beautiful stand of river cane and a little bit of an interpretive signage there to let people know. I mean, that's the kind of stuff we need to do. Erosion control, like I told you there. How many of you have been in the woods? I'm sure none of you are familiar with privet. Not at all. I've never seen anything like that. It's incredible. In some areas we have multiflora rose, in some areas we have Elaeagnus. For us, privet is the biggest one that we're having to deal with. It's a lot of privet, a lot of various ages. The seed bank is so heavy. It's really difficult, but one of the grants we got was invasive species control. We identified the impact that Chinese privet and other plants are having on the river cane population. So I had a theory, which was if we cleared out the privet, maybe the river cane would flourish. So when we got in there and started digging around, we also found that honeysuckle was causing a big issue with it as well. And the way honeysuckle causes an issue is it grows up river cane, and then it grows over the top of river cane, and it basically just shades the entire ground out below it, including river cane. So you get these huge, massive tangles of not just Japanese honeysuckle, but you also get Carolina jessamine, which is a native, but it also does the same thing. So it's not always just invasive that are causing issues with river cane. It's also, you know, some of the others too that are allowed to flourish in the absence of a dominant plant. So what you're seeing is what I see every day, which is all this privet over here, and then y'all see the flags. Those are existing river cane culms. Culm, of course, is the stem that grows up. Rhizome is the stem that grows with the ground. So what we've done is we've come in, and on our hands and knees, we're crawling around cutting privet, chainsaws, weed eaters, loppers, machetes, and every time we cut something, we swab it with about a 25% glyphosate. Okay, We're not spraying, we're swat, we're doing the cut and squirt, if you will. The amazing thing that we found, all this river cane that we marked, this grew in a span of 2 months. Okay, the biggest river cane we saw was about 4, maybe 5 feet tall. As soon as we cleared away the privet and everything else, nothing but river cane, all of a sudden we saw one shoot up, we saw little things in the ground about like that. 2 months later, 12 feet tall. So what we found out was it was the rhizomes in the ground and their maturity level that gives rise to the size cones. Here we were going into it thinking, okay, if we clear it, 15, 20 years later, if we maintain our efforts to get rid of the erosion or the privet, we'll have some harvestable river cane. I had harvestable river cane in 3 months. That was new. Nobody knew that. So we're all freaking out. We're like, oh God, I can't believe we can't. I had one of the old ladies come in. She goes, yeah, I can use 2 of these to make river cane vest. Man, that was huge. We thought we were in it for like 25 years. And a lot of people kind of lost enthusiasm for it. But when I showed them the columns that shot up from the historical coral, these things can live 20, 30, 40 years. That's what happened. So, man, we went crazy. We started clearing a whole bunch of stuff, and sure enough, man, river cane started shooting here. So it's fantastic what we learned just from that standpoint. The other thing we did was we harvested some rhizomes from an area where they were getting ready to clear from a new building. And we took them and planted them in raised beds. Okay, we took those rhizomes. And again, the knowledge that we had at that time basically said they got to be at least 12 to 18 inches in length. If you do anything shorter, they're not going to go, they're not going to. This box, we planted rhizomes anywhere from 2 inches long all the way up to 18 inches long. Okay, we planted them, we started getting things sprouting up and everything like that. This is what it looks like coming up out of the ground. Just pop it up. So we planted it in 3 different beds, and we had river cane start popping up. First year we had it all start popping up like that. That's that same box that we just planted. That one, at the end of the summer, that's what it looked like. Okay. So why not just put the rhizomes in the ground? If you've got pieces about this big, what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to be able to plant the rhizome. You're going to be able to let them grow, store enough energy so it can be transplanted in the field. You can take them and put them straight into the field. That's great. But if you want to move them in a lot of different locations, you've got a very small window to harvest rhizomes. You can only harvest them January through about early April, and then that's it. When it's actively growing, they don't transplant with crap. So you've got a limited window. So what we try to do is harvest the rhizomes, put them in buckets, grow them out, and then when they go dormant again, we can replant. So we've got that window of time to work with, which is why we did that. So we got these grants. This proved successful. So then I went to USEP, which is United South and Eastern Tribes, which is from a subset of NRCS, and said, hey, I can do this in a small box. Imagine what I could do with a greenhouse. So they granted us a greenhouse, and we're able to use a greenhouse. But I had a different idea. So this is where the other stuff comes into play. I love spitballing, and that's kind of what I was doing. We want to transplant river cane into areas and utilize it for erosion control, right? What do you do when you've got an area that's just bare? You come in, you put that netting down, right? A lot of people come in there, seed, and then they put that erosion netting down and stake it down. Well, here's what we tried, right? We took the erosion netting, we put some weed fabric down first, rolled out the erosion netting, then we put the rhizomes in that, sprinkled a little bit of a rooting hormone on top of that, and then we covered them with topsoil, okay? And then we covered it with another layer. River cane popped up everywhere. Now we can come in, we can cut them into squares like that and stake them down wherever we want them to be. So a different way of transplanting. It was so funny when I was talking to folks about that. They're just like, God, how, why? It's like, just try it. Try different things, experiment with it. People haven't done that in a while. We've done it in many different other things. Why not river cane? And that's what we're seeing. I took a stream erosion class through NC State. And they were talking about, oh, Virginia's all good. Oh, you can do this. Oh, you can do that. Live stake. I was like, you guys ever use river cane on the top? He's like, what? It's just not thought of. And the reason it's not thought of is, if I ask you guys right now, and your life dependent on, where would you go to buy river cane? It's not commercially available. You can't grow it from seed. You can. Boy, that's painful. So what we're trying to do is increase the availability of river cane so we can actually expand the usage of it. Right now, it's great. It's like trying to get like a very, very rare ingredient to make a cake. You can't make a cake unless you got the ingredient. Same way here. You can't put river cane out. So what we're trying to do is teach folks how to take rhizomes and transplant them to an area and get the best thing. So the other thing we do is a nice little fun thing called chunk and plump. Okay, that is finding a great section of river cane and just taking all the rhizomes and planting them in our new greenhouse. Look at that. So we built these beds and we transplanted rhizomes from this field where they were going to be cleared over, and they grew. Fantastic. This is a rhizome. Everywhere you see a little bud like that, it's going to shoot up a column. Okay, so you got to make sure you have at least 2 or 3 of those little buds on a rhizome and plant. The chunk and plump method is a little different. Okay, this is giant river cane growing along the Catawba River in a power line right away. The people that manage that property are like, man, we got to cut this stuff back. We got to cut this stuff back. And I'm like, you think we can come there and harvest something? He's like, dude, you can have all of it if you want. This stuff is probably some of the best river cane I've seen around us. This is growing right here, and this is growing into the right of way. So what we do is we come in with a backhoe, and we go about this far under the ground, and we scoop and we lift up and we cut cleanly all the rhizomes that are still dangling. Take it, put it on a flatbed truck, put it on little pallets like that, and haul it out into the field, and then put it in the ground. We chill the ground up, we stick it right in the ground, and it takes fantastic. All right, so now we're going to be able to chunk and plump river cane and establish a whole corridor of river cane where there was no river cane, or it's become denuded for some other reason. So the most exciting thing happened by doing all this work and chatting with different folks. It inspired folks to want to learn a little bit more about making baskets. So they worked with some artisans from Cherokee. They worked with some artisans up here in the upstate. Okay, that's Cassie and Aaron. Aaron is my director. They harvested the river cane and dried it, and they dyed it using walnut, bloodroot, things like that. And that's the first river cane basket that's been made in 100 years by a native Catawba Indian. Isn't that cool? That's awesome. That did give me chills. Come on, part of that. That's the inspiration. That's why we do what we do. But now these folks are reconnecting with their culture. This is something that hasn't happened in a long time. So what else could we do, right? We could do a whole bunch of other stuff. How about Schweinet sunflower? What's so amazing about Schweinet sunflower? What if you guys look it up and you read online? It'll tell you, oh, it used to be part of the vast prairies, the short grass prairies and Piedmont prairies of South Carolina, all this kind of. You will not find hardly anywhere where it says that Native Americans used to eat the tubers as a food. Okay. So as the buffalo went, as all the other species went, the prairies disappeared, right? And so the Schweinet sunflower became one of the most rarest wildflowers in the United States. That's great English or not. I was a wildlife biologist. Now, I admit to mistakes. First effort failed miserably. And we kind of cut off a few ties with some folks who are a little bit pissed. So they had some Schweinet sunflower. They gave us about 20 plants and we planted them. And they were doing fantastic. And we hired a young lady who said she had all this farming experience and stuff like that. And we asked her, the wind blew them over. All we want you to do is stake them up. You can't stake them up, just pull them up and dig them a little bit further in the ground. Stand them up. Okay. Came back on Monday. She had ripped them all up out of the ground, put them in a wheelbarrow, and figured she was done. And she'd get to them next week. She filled the bucket up with water, the wheelbarrow with water, and killed all of them. Every one of them, federally threatened and endangered species, dead. A whole wheelbarrow full of them dead. So hat in hand, when you go back to somebody and you go, hey, yeah, I really appreciate you giving us that rare wildflower. We kind of killed them. Can we have some more? You know, it didn't happen. So we know we wanted to try and figure out a way to recover. We know there are small populations scattered all over the place. The cool thing was the Schweinet sunflower, they love to grow in the crappiest soil. They love being disturbed. The reason they flourish so much is because the buffaloes browse and trample. And that ground, and they were one of the few wildflowers that flourished. They're the Georgia asters, things like that. So the cool thing is, this is what the plant looks like when you pull it up out of the ground. Y'all see those tubers? Those were cooked and eaten or pounded. I mean, they were pretty wicked. So driving along, we were driving along the roads and stuff like that, and the lady told me, she goes, I think I've seen some Schwannett sunflowers over near the top. I'm like, really? She said, yeah, she sent me a couple photos, and I looked, I was like, "Holy crap," and she's right. She told me where they were, and I went there, and sure enough, in a right of way where they just did a brand new bridge, they went over into an area where there were some Schwannets, didn't realize there were Schwannets there, scooped up the dirt and put it all on the roadside, and we saw Schwannett sunflower popping up. So I snuck over there. It bloomed all the way up from August into probably about November. I snuck over there, I looked around, started plucking seed heads. I got a handful of seed heads, not many, just like 2 or 3. And took them back, put some desking in there, put them in there, and dried them out just a little bit, right? I raised, out of the 12 seeds, I raised 11 plants. Okay. We planted them in these raised beds, and I put up 6-foot T-posts and put deer fencing around it, because I know the deer love these guys. They also claw them up and eat the tubers as well. And look at that. All of them flourished, right? They all went to seed. And that just shows you how tall they are. It seems to get 12, 15 feet tall. They're huge. And so I'm looking at this, she's blooming. I'm like, I got a gold mine here. So what we did was we harvested the tubers and we put them in plants, in pots. And these are the seeds we got. This is all the little ray flowers. The black ones are the seeds. So we've got well over probably at least a handful, if not 2 handfuls of these seeds. Okay. So now when it gets to be warmer, probably around April, I'm going to get about 500-600 little peat pellets. And I'm going to plant in one of those seeds, and we're going to raise them, and then we're going to plant them on our farm where it's got deer fencing up and everything like that, and irrigate them. The cool thing about it is once we grow those up and get those growing, we can actually take a seed harvester, harvest those seeds, and then take them and mix them in with our native seed mix that we use in erosion areas. And once again, all around Catawba, you can see Schwannett. I thought that was pretty cool. One of the little things that we did. And it's kind of cool because you know what? The next day after I harvested those seeds, it says no mowing from January to April. This is August. It was a Mexican mowing crew. Couldn't read English. They mowed the entire thing. Cut them all down. The wildlife biologist for the state, the botanist, freaked out, flipped out, couldn't believe it. I was like, I don't know what to tell you. He's like, man, we could have just harvested some of those seeds. I'm like, yeah, right. So I'm gonna kind of grow them out and everything to a point, and then kind of go back with them and everything. So it's a good thing that we harvested those seeds and stuff and got those out. So the Schwannets is starting to go again. Another project we're working on there is we wanted to do some reptile and amphibian surveys. So basically, we're surveying the bottomland hardwoods, the little ephemeral ponds, and intermittent streams for herps. We got funding to be able to do amphibian, reptile, and bats. So we got a chance to do those all for the summer. What we're doing is we're not doing any type of toe clipping. We're not doing any type of marking or anything like that. All we're doing is we're collecting the specimens, we're photographing them, and we're releasing them. We're there just specifically for right now for documentation. We're not really studying movements or anything like that. We're just trying to get a baseline of what's there. Okay. So DIA, the funding, basically provided us with endangered species grants, and it included some staffing hours. And we also got 2 internships, which I applied for, which is great. And we also collaborated with other organizations as well. So we set up a drift fence, we did cover boards, we did dip netting. This is that little ephemeral pond right there to the right. And we found a whole bunch of stuff. We found spotted salamanders, marbled salamanders, a lot of different species of frogs. In that ephemeral pond, we did some dip netting. We were able to identify spotted salamander larvae, which brought us to another issue, which is unfortunately, they need about 4 months to mature into adults and come out and walk. This pond's drying up in about 2.5 months. So got all these egg masses, and none of them are getting to reach the point where they can actually, so we're thinking about doing something there. I'll tell you about shortly. We also incorporated frog tubes. Anybody know about frog tubes? Little vertical tubes and stuff. Yeah, those are great, especially when you pick them up, you look down there, there's a big wolf spider sitting there looking at you. It's kind of cool. We also did road surveys. We also did auditory recording, so going at night with a high-powered microphone and recording calling frogs as well. A lot of fun stuff. I enjoy doing all that stuff. The other thing we did was we also kind of partnered with Winthrop University, and we're doing box turtle radio tracking. And, well, here's a bunch of the species and stuff that we found. One guy told me, don't turn over that rock right there, it's got a copperhead under it, so I turned it over, and guess what, there's a copperhead under it. So, and we did have one, so I photographed it, and everything was cool. We got some salamanders, we got a bunch of things. I actually talked with Andrew, and he told me that actually what we thought were two-line salamanders were reclassified into wolf salamanders. So we've documented wolf salamanders on the property, slimy salamanders, all kinds of really, really nifty things, a lot of cool species of frogs. And then our box turtles, we work with them to tag these box turtles. We tagged 10 males and 10 females to start with. And we invited a high school class to come and help us track them down, which is kind of neat. They came in and did a bunch of fun stuff with us. But this was actually done by a Catawba citizen who is a senior at Winthrop University. So we gave her the internship. She helped us with river cane and she helped us with the box turtles. And what we're trying to do is show a correlation between box turtles and using river cane. Do they use it for hibernacula? Do they use it as foraging? Do they use it for cover? How do these box turtles use it? Because I guarantee you in the next 5 to 7 years, box turtles are probably going to be on our species of concern or threatened list. With all the habitat fragmentation going on in South Carolina, especially on the coast, especially in the mountains, especially in the people, it's going to create a severe impact on box turtles because they live 80 years. They mate every other year. They have a low chance of reproducing, and so that combined with fast rapid growth is going to happen. So if we can actually see that, we're going to help two things. We're going to help the ecologically threatened river cane, and we're going to help hopefully the threatened box turtle by correlating those together. Okay, because again, river cane is significant. I don't care why it gets planted. I don't care why it gets protected. I don't care any of that stuff. I'm just showing different ways that we can try and do that stuff. And we're overlaying the box turtle movements with the current GIS documented patches that we have on property. So looking at that data. And then on top of it, so we can let the tribal citizens know what we're doing, we had Peyton do a presentation in front of the tribe. And so she documented what she saw, the movements she had and everything, and the conclusions she made. And so we have a lot of people now who are really interested in box turtles. Because we basically took a person that they grew up with, and she's going in for further education and showed her how she's being impactful for the tribe, with the tribe. And they really did that pretty cool. So Peyton did a great job for us. I can't help but tell you guys this quick little story. Y'all know about the Congaree Swamp National Monument that's now a park? Y'all know how that became a national monument? So there was a congressman at one time, and this is why I say I'll do anything I got to protect it. Congressman at the time, they were going to log all that. And a lot of groups didn't want that to happen, but they really had no power. And so they finally got in the ear. I think it was a congressman or a councilman or something. And he got in touch with a friend of his who was a really good birder. And they paddled canoes up and down the river up there. And he swore he heard an ivory-billed woodpecker. And they documented that they swore they heard an ivory-billed woodpecker and stuff. And they said, even if there's a chance of an ivory-billed woodpecker, don't you think we should preserve it? And people kind of, so all these groups started coming, and of course, it's like anything else, it's power suggestion. 4 or 5 people like, yeah, I think we heard an ivory-billed woodpecker. And the land was set aside and protected. So years and years down the road, WIS-TV did an interview with him and told it was the anniversary of the swamp now became a national park, so a national monument. And they asked him about that, and they asked him, was it really true? Did you really hear ivory-billed woodpecker? And to this day, or he passed now, but he said, yeah, I swear I think I did. Well, what would have happened if nobody bought into it? And he pointed over the base of a tree. He brought in a bunch of cannonballs and said, well, if not, then it's going to be a Civil War site. So he's going to do anything he could to protect the habitat. And that's kind of the way I feel about stuff too. Chiropteran surveys. These are kind of interesting because bats are poorly studied in the Piedmont of South Carolina. We study them in the mountains, we study them on the coast. There's a lot of work done, but the Piedmont poorly represented. The best way for us to do studies for bats is do auditory recordings. And so we applied for a grant, and I researched the different techniques and things were used, and they gave us the money to do the grant. And realistically, it was a no-brainer for an endangered species grant because pretty much all bat species are going to be threatened or are threatened or will be threatened, right? Because of white nose, other things that's happening. We don't have a lot of caves in the Piedmont of South Carolina. So most of the bats that we're going to be attracting are you're going to see mostly tree roosting bats and probably some solitary as well as colonial bats. But that also includes a lot of the myotis species, which are the ones that are most significantly hit by by white nose. So by saying all that, we said, sure, that's what we want to do. So we got the grant. And so I started reaching out. Y'all, how many of y'all know Ben up here? Ben Neese? Ben works here. Yeah, Ben's a great guy. He has been extremely helpful with me, very patient, in getting us set up with vetting all our calls and putting them through NAVAT, which he's the Southeastern Hub coordinator for that. And so we were going to adopt a cell and we're going to take all of our data and use the standard protocols and survey protocols that they were using and all the different settings on the recorders and Sonovac and things like that and present our data to them. And Ben was like, well, you know, there's another cell around you. You guys want to do that too. So we ended up taking 3 cells. 3 cells were basically just quadrants around us and around. And the reason we took 3 is because we were present, Catawba Nation was present in 3 of these quadrants, right? So we took 3 of these quadrants. You set up a detector in 4 corners of each quadrant, leave them up for 4 days, recording from sunset to sunrise. And then you collect all that data. Then you also do a mobile survey 2 nights in a row in each quadrant. That's a lot of work, y'all. A lot of work. How many of y'all done any bat auditory? Anybody done? Yeah. Okay. How many calls did you go? Did y'all actually go through and analyze all of them, or did you auto ID them with like Sonobat or? Yeah, auto. So we did that too, but then we went back and manually vetted them as well, which is great. And so we ended up with literally thousands and thousands and thousands of calls. Okay. But this is our setup. So this is actually at a golf course up in Fort Mill. We actually, the cool thing about this was we hooked up with a lot of private partners. And so automatically they're aware of Catawba Nation and the work we're doing is, you know, for our biology and natural resources department. We set these up and we recorded for 4 days. Then we also had a suction mounted mount that was actually on top of our truck. And we drove around probably about a 15-mile radius and recorded everything that we heard there. And we went through and we actually ran them through Sonobat. And then ones that were a little confusing that may look like myotis and stuff, we went through and tried to manually vet those. The equipment we used was Titley Animat Swifts. We used directional mics for our regular surveys. We used an omnidirectional mic for our mobile surveys. And like I told you, that was the parameters of what we did. These were the 3 cells that we used, right? Those were the cells that we did. And these are the partners. We had 4 partners in each one of the quadrants. So we had Shield Church, Banker Steel, which was crazy. I never knew it existed, but it was this factory that had a whole bunch of steel that was used to ship steel via rail all over South Carolina for bridges and things like that. And they had this beautiful pond in the back. And I talked to the guy and he's like, yeah, these guys are all awesome. These 2 were amazing. Catawba Nation Food Distribution Center was in one of the cells. Green Earth Housing Development was one, and then also our honey preserve was in the other. So all 3 of these had a connection to Catawba. I want to point out these 2, Firethorn, because one of the bats that's been really threatened by white nose syndrome has been the tricolor bat. And the tricolor bat is going to be listed as federally endangered. Look at this. Now, again, nobody's ever surveyed these areas. So we were the ones that went in there. P2, right? Paramyotis, that's the tricolor bat. FQ is the brown bat. Then we also have red bats, evening bats, Mexican free-tail bats. That's what these all mean. But look at the numbers. Over 200, 635. That's what we documented there. So there's a colony. There's colonies on these 2 places. They're golf courses. So when I talked to them, I said, hey, here's what I'll do. I'll be glad to do this. I'll come and do a presentation to your folks. I'll tell them how crazy and wonderful it is. You got bats and all this kind of stuff. And he's like, yeah, that's cool, do that. Now their membership got together and they want to donate about $1,500 and they want to buy that house and put it around the back bill. I mean, that's awesome. That's great stuff. We also did a training class. We went up to Mammoth Cave with Joe, who is actually the guy who developed the Sonobat software. And so we had class at 7 o'clock in the morning till 7 at night. We took a 30-minute break and then we were out to 2 a.m. for a solid week. Okay. The cool thing we did was not only did we learn how to manually vet the data with Joe, the one who actually developed the software, we also learned a little bit more about how to manage our data flow and our work. And we also handled bats, which is kind of cool as well. But the coolest thing we did, we light tagged bats. Anybody ever heard of that? what they do, they take a little bat, they catch them in the mist net, and they glue with Elmer's glue stick, which is non-toxic, right? He likes purple, so he used purple. And you take this little thing and you stick it on them. So for the different species, they had different colors. You stick it on there, and then he goes over there, and we stand around with backpack mounted live audio recorders on our back with a big microphone sticking up. The reason they tag him with the light so you can see him. So he flies over you and all of a sudden it registers a call and you think, you know, 100% that's a little brown bat. You know, 100% that's a tricolor, you know. So in other words, he's using calls that he knows 100% are those bats to improve his software. So I'm a photographer. I like photograph stuff. I thought that's kind of cool. So I went out and did a couple of long exposure photographs when they're releasing these bats. But it's kind of cool. You see these things flying all through the woods, and they're not like zipping 100 miles an hour. They're just like slowly flying through, circling around, stuff like that. So I took a photograph. Look at that. Isn't that cool? So yeah, so that's a track. That was a little brown bat, and he was basically, Joe was standing over here, and he tossed him up here, and he flew in nice circles. And we're all standing on the perimeter. There's one of us there, another one over here, a couple over here, and every one of us got a little brown bat call, 100% documented call. So that was pretty neat. We also did some training in Georgia on how to look at culverts and bridges and stuff in the winter to see roosting bats. We found out that tricolor bats love the scupper holes in bridges. We did not find anything other than the evening bats and big brown bats, which I was pretty excited about anyway, but you know, everybody's like, oh, it's just a big brown bat. I'm like, I guess your mom is just a mom. So I saw the big brown bats, and I thought that's pretty awesome to see these little guys. And then we went into Georgia and we saw, they said that they normally have a tricolor, and we looked up in the scupper and there was a tricolor sitting up in there. So really kind of cool. And it gave me ideas about possibly retrofitting our 4 culverts, which are, you know, 6 feet tall and regular stream bottom. It's a bridge. So we basically walk in and look through the seams, and I'm thinking to myself, gosh, you know, they don't put expansion seams in all these bridges. So I'm developing an idea about using party plank, which is a cementous fiber, and putting it in the winter because it's going to mimic the concrete, sealing it on both ends and lining the culvert going vertically this way instead of the seams, and see if I can increase the desirability of bats to want to roost and use those, since they're losing a lot of their winter hibernation and stuff. This is what we did, walk around looking for guano staining, guano, stuff like that. And then this is the paperwork that you use to basically classify what kind of bridge you're in, what time of year it is, what kind of bats you see, can you identify. That's how Jen Kendall found the very first gray bat in South Carolina that was documented, doing culvert surveys. Y'all know Jen Kendall? You know Jen. Y'all need to get to know Jen. She was the Wildlife Society's biologist of the year. She's amazing, amazing. She works with Ben. She's just incredible. She's so humble and quiet, but man, that gal, she knows so much about that. She's such a great resource, and she's so willing to work with you. You're going to find that a lot of biologists and a lot of folks, if you're passionate about it, they're more than willing to open up to you and help you with a lot of stuff. And Jen and Ben, they're all know each other, that's for sure. And so what did I do? I went online on Amazon and I found these little borescope cameras that you attach to the bottom of your cell phone. Started sticking them in the crevices, and we discovered these bats, and I was chatting about it. I was like, yeah, I'm a redneck without a big budget. So I bought one of these iPhone borescope cameras, cost me $30. And everyone was looking at me like, how did you know to do that? I'm like, are you kidding me? You guys, y'all have too much money. So the one person had like a $700 borescope camera. I'm $30 online. So you guys have $30, right? They're semi-rigid. You can put them on a hanger pole that you get from Lowe's, and you literally can stick it up 15 feet up in the air, and it's got little LED lights on the end of it. And you look at your phone and you can see it the feedback. It's just that neat. So correlating data for benthic macroinvertebrates. A lot of bats, I'm correlating it to bats, right? So a lot of these benthic macroinvertebrates are in the water during some part or all the whole part of their life cycle, but most of them it's just a part of their larval life cycle. Emerge. So when they emerge, a lot of them emerge en masse, and a lot of them emerge at night. So to me, it makes sense that bats would be feeding on these things, right? So here's the cool thing. If bats are feeding on certain caddisflies, certain stoneflies, certain mayflies, dragonflies, stuff like that, if the water quality goes down to crap and those disappear, what's going to happen to the populations of bats? They're going to go down. So correlating this data, we're going to do that this year, set up auditory calls recorders all on these string corridors. And if we've got, and also sample these creeks, And we can get a baseline of the benthic macroinvertebrates that are there. If the water degrades in quality, we can show that the biotic index of those species, if the water quality goes down, then they'll disappear, and that'll affect bats as well. So by correlating all this data, we put in protections to not just protect the species, but protect the habitat, and that's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck, is protecting the habitat. And so if you protect the habitat of a stream, you're going to have to protect the buffers of the stream, the surrounding habitat. So now we're looking at a big umbrella protection. It's going to benefit bats, it's going to benefit the benthic macroinvertebrates, the water quality down the road. I mean, it's going to do all that stuff. So, and guess what? If we have a threatened stream water, we might even use river tank to stabilize the banks. So it's all a win-win. These are a lot of the species that we see. We know that bats feed on, right? And we know that they feed on midges. We know they feed on caddisflies, some mayflies when they hatch early in the mornings. They feed on a lot of lepidopterans, and they also feed on beetles. The big brown bat, you have to wear gloves when you handle a big brown bat because it's got big teeth and strong jaws to crunch beetles. Myotas have little ones, so you don't have to wear, you can wear latex gloves with those guys because they have such tiny dentition, they're not used to having to crunch beetles. All these streams, all these benthic macroinvertebrates, different sampling techniques, different ways to document, find endangered threat species or species that are in peril due to degrading water quality. All that works together, especially if you go in and you involve another species, like tricolored bats and red bats and stuff. So I mean, there's all kinds of bats that you can look at. Some of them are solitary, some of them are colonial. But you know, it's funny if we do more of these type of studies and we correlate our data with other things, it won't be a surprise when stuff happens. For example, wind energy sounds fantastic, right? Everybody loves wind energy and solar energy. We're probably going to, in our lifetime, even in my lifetime, be the old fart that I am. It'll probably happen in my lifetime. The hoary bat's probably going to go extinct if we keep putting up a lot of these wind turbines because they don't echolocate when they're migrating. So therefore, they can't detect the rotors. And we're seeing millions of hoary bats being killed every year. That was an unintended consequence. Well, what's going to happen now? I guarantee you, probably the next 3 or 5 years, you'll see hoary bats going to be invaded. And it's not white nose. It's just, we got it before we make these wholesale decisions. They need us, right? We're the ones with our boots on the ground. I had a young lady tell me that we don't need to be sampling streams for benthic macroinvertebrates anymore because she can take a drop of water and run it through the DNA and tell me what's in there. I showed her a picture of a net spinning cat. She had no idea what the hell it was. How are you going to correlate your data if you don't even know what you're looking at? You're just looking at a drop of water. You got to get out and see it. Fieldwork is extremely important. So, we love bats. We also got a grant through Duke. Duke Energy has this Catawba Watery Habitat Improvement Program, and they have grants. So I applied for the grants, and we're going to be able to put up these rocket boxes. Now, the rocket boxes are great because they mimic trees. So they're actually specifically for tree roosting species. We don't have caves and crevices and stuff like that. So traditional bat houses may or may not work for us. But these super rocket roosts, which are developed by Bat Conservation Management, John Chinger, who actually partnered with Joe to put on the class that was for manually vetting sonobat. It's all the community works together. They make these things, and they are fascinating. If you lift that cover off, they've got horizontal or 45 flat like that, and the bats sit on them like that. They're not hanging like this. They're actually giving them a place to rest. And they've been very successful for folks who put them up in the right spot. So we're going to partner with Jen, and hopefully she's going to be able to come out and they're going to be able to help us locate where we want to put these. We've got 8 of them. Our latest projects from this Duke thing were, of course, the bats. Also, yes, that's me, 25 feet up, putting up a bat house, a barred owl box. So being on the bottomland hardwood forested areas and stuff, we know we got barred owls. So for me, this is a great opportunity to put some boxes up. We get some barred owls in the boxes. We can put up a trail camera on them. We can record some video, put it on our website, and create awareness about these species that are living in the habitat of the Java Nation. And yesterday, when I was putting up those boxes, the harness snapped. Now, it was 25 feet up in the air, and that was kind of a puckering moment for me. That was kind of scary, but you know, we all take risks, right? So this is when I was down at the museum and stuff like that, and a little baby part out. You see the feathers from mom right here, and that's mom we're watching at another time. Barred owls are amazing critters, and we'll also be able to collect pellets from the base and be able to do pellet analysis and be able to look at food and stuff as well. This is the ephemeral pond where we've had the salamanders. So part of that grant that I applied for, we know marble salamanders go in there and they lay their eggs and stuff, and then when it floods, they're doing fine, and then spotted salamanders as well. And we did find spotted salamanders on the property, they still have our cover board, which is neat. It's almost like there's a switch that's flipped. We looked all summer long and we were joking, we were gonna get t-shirts that said, this place is devoid of life. Because we would find maybe frogs a little bit, but then June through October, nothing. All of a sudden, one day around late October, early November, we flipped when we started finding marbled salamanders like crazy. So they were moving, right? It was obviously that time of year for them. So what we're planning on doing is buying a flashboard riser, and there's a 48-inch pipe, and this fits in that pipe, and we'll be able to put risers in there. We're going to be able to increase the amount of water that's in there, so we can increase the duration of the pond, give them about 4 months to allow them to emerge, and then the pond can dry up. That's fine, because this is a species that has adapted its breeding to ephemeral ponds. The other thing about spotted salamanders that, if you don't know, they come back to their natal grounds every year. So it's not like they come in and go, oh, that pond's not there, and then move on. They come back every year. So we know we've got spotted salamander egg masses, and we've got larvae that we've documented. So by doing this, we're going to increase the amount of water that's in there and hopefully increase the population of spotted salamander. That's the larvae that we found. It was pretty cool to see that. And then the other project that we did was we are actually working with Duke, and we're going to put up some old power poles, and we're going to put up osprey platforms, because we're starting to see ospreys move up along the Catawba River and start trying to find some nesting. We know we got bald eagles there already. Bald eagles don't like to use, obviously, man-made nesting platforms, but osprey as well. And we're putting 2 of these up in the waterfront park at Catawba, again, with interpretive signage to raise awareness of these birds, what they do, why it's important and stuff. Just part of the whole thing that we're trying to do. So data collection is great, but what can we utilize it for? Species utilization, how they're using existing habitats, establish these connections with decreased habitat quality and how it affects those species. For example, loss of river cane swamp rabbit. We think we've got 1 swamp rabbit on the property. So we're going to try and figure out, we found out, who's the young man working on swamp rabbits? Yeah, good point about the latrines on top of the log. Thank you so much for that. We haven't found any yet, but we're going to be looking. We're going to be looking for shit. Yeah. Also, imperiled habitat, how to increase awareness and the importance of the habitat that have anthropogenic issues, right? Trash, litter. I'm working with our environmental services department. We're trying to do the best we can to incorporate new technology, because we don't have sewer. We've got septic tanks. Those septic tanks overflow and they flow right into the creek. Okay, so getting rid of that, trying to work together with that. Okay. And also, for example, correlating these imperiled habitats, box turtle, river cane, species of bats that feed over river cane, right? River cane actually harbors a lot of lepidopteran species. So our bats flying over these things at any point during the night to be able to use them for food. Water quality, benthic microinvertebrates, and also emerging aquatics that other animals depend on. So how will this program be utilized? We're hoping to mitigate the increasing effects of climate change. We're trying to determine the presence of endangered threatened species of concern. The biggie here, we talk about traditional ecological knowledge. I am not Catawba. I am not going to sit down and tell them what they need to do with their land. My job is to collect data and present it to them and let them make those decisions, right? It's my job to give them the information and then they decide what they want to do with it. If they want further input from me, I'm more than happy to provide it, but I am not going to sit there and tell them what they should and they shouldn't do. Okay, that's one of the biggest ways you can just completely 100% crush a relationship with any tribal nation, is to go in and act like you know better than they do. Okay, this is their land, they've been living on it. Catawba's been building pots out of clay pottery when they were making pyramids in Egypt. That's how long they've been around. So how arrogant of me coming and telling them this is what you should and shouldn't do. I'm not doing it. Okay, so that's a part of getting that relationship with Catawba, building that trust, so that they do feel like they can come to me and ask me questions about things, and I will give them honest answers. But that is one thing that we are not going to do. We're going to discover, document, and try to protect species that they want us to protect. Maybe it's endangered, maybe it's cultural, maybe it's featured prominently in their traditions, in their ceremonies, or in their folklore. right? Doesn't matter to me, they tell me they want to protect it, and I'm gonna do everything I can to protect it, okay? We need to measure success, we need to measure lack of success, and we need to measure failure, right? All these plans and stuff, if I'm digging up all these Schweiner sunflowers and they're not growing, that's a failure. I need to learn from that and continue, right? Also, develop a framework to help foster appreciation, awareness, and reconnection to our natural resources. The younger Catawba folks today don't have that connection with the land like their ancestors did. So hopefully we can foster some more of that. And then the other thing, like we did with Peyton, like we did with Nate and a few others, identify career pathways to get Catawba youth involved and in position to be the future leaders of natural resource conservation for the Catawba Nation. And by the way, I want to introduce my staff. This is Courtney. Thank you. Two people.
We're a little bit over on time, so if you have to step out, we understand. There will be lunch after this for the students, but I have one or two questions in the room. They must be saving it for the second.
Yes.
What's your, sorry, what's your podcast?
Oh, me and my wife do a podcast called Walking on the Wild Side. Yeah, you can find it on all the platforms and stuff. It's a lot of times it's either like we paddled out to the Rocky Shoals spider lilies and podcasting about them. We've done owl prowls, we podcast in a lot of places, and a lot of times it's just sitting on the back porch talking about cool stuff. Yeah. Walking on the Wild Side, it's a brown icon with a little track. We've got my wife and my name on it.
Yeah, I have two questions. So how successful are you at keeping that privet out of that cane when you're able to establish it? And also, do you see a pathway for scaling that up, like as far as operational? So
That's a good question. So successful in terms of the ones we cut down? Absolutely, right?
keeping them out of that.
Yeah, so realistically, there's no such thing as elimination. It's only going to be suppression.
Mhm.
So the idea is to identify a 1, 3, 5, 10, 12, 20-year plan. So the first year we went in there and we experimented with different ways to cut it, what time of year was the best way. Second year, we come back in this year and we're going to be incorporating different chemical treatments combined with mechanical removal, right? We're also chipping everything that we have in there. And then this next year coming up, we applied for a grant to actually hire a 4-person crew. That's all they did. And it's going to be a combination of mechanical. So it's going to be a combination of going to new areas, going back to the same areas, gauging what new growth is there, eliminating that growth. Can we go in? So, it's a cool thing. I was surprised how many people aren't aware that River King's grass. So we can go in and actually mow the area. We can't burn because it's been dictated by BIA forestry. We can't burn on our property. We're trying to get that changed. But we can come in and mow it all, spray it with a 2,4-D, and only the River King can come back. We hope. So we're going to experiment with that. But that's a good question. And realistically, just like committing to growing River King, that's not something that you do and go, all right, we did it. Let's move on. It's going to be something that once you start, you're going to continue doing. There's been no proven method of eradication at all. So suppression is going to be the best way to go. And as long as you build that into your program, you've got to build in documentation, regrowth, treatment, right? So you're moving this way, you're eliminating, you're coming back and doing that. You're eliminating, you're coming back and doing this and this, you're eliminating. I mean, it's like a rolling.
And that was my question, as far as like the material and the energy inputs, it seems pretty intensive.
Yeah.
And if you're doing hacking support, that's really for, smaller scale as well as like open understories and things like that.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because at certain times of the year, privet is not conducive to be removed.
Yeah.
So, and it's also got such a vigorous root system that you're not pulling it up. So you're cutting it off and you're hoping, but the seed bank is so dense. And it's being added to your view because the seeds float. We got a huge river out in front of us. So anytime it floods out of its banks, we get a brand new seed bed. So it's just going to have to be something you continuously do. The seeds apparently don't last long, so maybe by staying ahead of it and suppressing it, we can give River King a foothold and we can establish it and getting it taken. Maybe it'll suppress future privet growth by outcompeting the privet if we give it a head start. That's the hope.
Is that like a 2 to 3 year viability in the seed bank?
More like 4 to 6. Yeah. Some of that stuff that stays in the ground is viable for a long time, but they think privet is probably like a 4 to 6 year. In our
I was
part of
talking
the
more
country.
about cane.
Oh, River
Yeah.
cane, it'll grow for years. The bad thing about it being grass and everything like that is that once it goes to seed, it dies. So we have to vary the plants that we put down there that we stop, because we take it off from one area. If it all decides to go to seed, all that work's done, because it's all gonna go to seed and die. So we're trying to do some genetic vigorosity, some variability by bringing river cane from different locations, stuff like that, just to try and establish.
Thank you.
It's a lot. It's a lot. You want to? Well, look here, I appreciate y'all, your attention and, looking and listening and, most importantly, laughing at the judge. It sucks to come to judge. But I appreciate it. And if I can do anything for you, let me know. If you guys want to contact me, he's got my email address. You're more than welcome to reach out to me and see what we do and see what we get. So, thank you.
Uh,